Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and you guys know what time it is. It's time to talk about current events in the online fitness community, and OmarIsuf has made a video in which he made a few points, but the overall video was ridiculous, and I feel like we just did this a couple weeks ago. Time to go through it again though, where he said, in the video, training like a powerlifter will not give you maximum hypertrophy. Do you know any powerlifters, Omar? I'm starting to wonder. So let me go ahead and put on my +5 hat of speechcraft, lovingly called my +5 hat of autism by many of you, and let's talk about this. Essentially, what Omar alluded to was that you can't just hit 1 rep maxes all the time and get big. Well, you can, it's just not optimal, and it's certainly not the efficient way to do it. But what does that have to do with powerlifting? What does it have to do with training like a powerlifter? Go back and look at someone who Omar interviews all the time, someone who Omar does business with, sells his books for him, everything else, like someone like Greg Nuckols. Greg Nuckols has done enormous amounts of data, studies involving size versus strength, who's determined that size does equal strength according to all of his own research that he's doing for his own doctoral work. Stuff he's done with Dr. Brad Schoenfeld. And Greg has actually pointed out repeatedly that the best way to be competitive as a power lifter or any strength athlete in a weight class sport is to be the shortest, leanest guy in your weight class. Why? Because you'll have more muscle than everybody else, right? So in light of that, in what world do you even get this ridiculous idea? Where do you get this ridiculous idea? Why? Because powerlifters don't inject their biceps and their triceps and their delts like bodybuilders do, so therefore you think they don't train for maximum hypertrophy? Pro tip here, Omar, in case you weren't aware, most bodybuilders, outside of their drug use itself contributing, the only reason their arms measure bigger than, say, a powerlifter is the amount of shit they're shooting in them. And that includes naturals oftentimes. Right, there are natural bodybuilders who do site enhancement and even site shoot their roids. This is not really an unknown factor. And you come over and you look at all the research on it, rep range is not a factor in hypertrophy. Total training volume, total training load is. So it's almost this ridiculous statement, and it's because he wants to go do some additional higher rep work. It's fine. I'm doing higher rep work all the time. He wants to do higher rep work that he's trying to tell people you can't train like a power lifter. I'm a power lifter. I'm a power lifter, and I'm not a small guy. I'm not massive. I'm a pretty decent sized guy. I'm a power lifter. What have you guys seen me do in the last week on camera? 10 rep sets of incline bench, 10 rep sets of curls, 10 rep sets of rows, 10 rep sets with belt squats. Yes, I do 10 rep sets on curls to improve my bench press. You guys have seen me do up to 20 rep sets on things like back work, back exercises. I do all this stuff. You telling me that won't maximize? You're telling me that doing 10 sets of 10 on the incline bench every week, 5 sets of 10 on both your bench press days is an accessory movement? You can't get big doing that? Telling me doing 10 rep sets on my curls, doing 5 sets of those on each of my bench workouts too, 10 sets of 10 on curls every week won't make me bigger? Seriously, Omar? That's what you're saying when you say you can't train like a power lifter. That's normal powerlifting training. Like, what do you guys think powerlifters do? Does anyone think that powerlifters don't use any training volume? And not everyone even chooses to periodize it into individual blocks. I have no problem with people doing that. I've written programs that way, and that's fine. That's fine if people want to do that. If you want to run some linear block periodization, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm currently doing concurrent periodization. You know what? I do 10 rep sets, 20 rep sets, and heavy singles all in the same week. It's just programmed and periodized. And here's what you need to realize with this. Hypertrophy is a product of training volume, workload, and fatigue combined with adequate rest and nutrition. Okay, that is hypertrophy. And if you want to get maximally strong, you have to get maximally big. And ideally, to be a serious powerlifter, what do you have to do? You have to look at your weight class and say, man, in a perfect world, I want to be an inch shorter with less body fat and more muscle than everybody else in my weight class. Why? Because you'll win. Let me state that again. You walk into a meet and you take your weight class, and the guys you're competing against are all 14% to 20% body fat and they're all 5'10", and you're 5'9" at 11% body fat in the same weight class. Notice I didn't even list a weight class. I'm just telling you by comparison, who's going to win? Who is most likely to win in that class unless something goes wrong? Assuming you made weight, assuming you've actually trained some heavy lifts on, you actually know how to perform the exercises, you're reasonably competent at them, who's going to win? You are. You're going to win. Why? Because you have more muscle than the other guys in the class, and you're an inch shorter. You're moving the weight an inch less distance in some cases. But because you have a hair less bone weight, you have less body fat, that means you have 10 to 15 pounds more muscle than everyone else in your class. The odds that any of them are going to be within 100 pounds of your total is only going to be some weird genetic freaks. And that's assuming you've learned how to perform the basic lifts. You don't have to have them perfectly peaked at that point. It'll help because, I mean, that extra 10 pounds on your bench will help. But your overall strength, just due to your hypertrophy, assuming you've done any training in singles at all, is probably even unpeaked going to be better than the other guys peaked because of your extra muscle mass. So where are you getting this idea about training for strength? And that's what we need to differentiate. And that's what I don't like, is that Omar is confusing the topics of peaking and neuromuscular efficiency and movement patterns with strength. Because you know what? You know what? Doing sets of 10 will make you stronger. I don't know what world you don't realize that, or why you're trying to pretend that it doesn't. That's still strength training. Are you training for progression? In other words, let's say you're doing sets of 10 on the incline with 100 pounds. You plan on using 100 pounds forever? Well, if you take that 100 pounds up to 115 pounds for sets of 10, aren't you strength training? Is that going to increase your 1 rep max? If you haven't been really bench pressing and you test your 1 rep max on the bench and you do a bunch of high rep 10 rep sets on the incline bench, the example he gave, and it goes up 50 pounds over time on your 10 rep maxes, and you go back and test your bench again, is your bench going to have gone up? Yeah, it's going to have gone up a lot. Your max bench press will increase from that. Increasing the size of your pecs, your delts, or your triceps will increase your bench. Now, does that mean you might have to peak a little bit to get it ideal? Sure. Meaning that hypertrophy might not be an improved max the first time you come in and hit a max, right? Because if you peaked a little bit, your max will go down a little bit, but the potential for it will go up. It doesn't require you to do a lot of peaking for it to go up, though. Meaning if your 10 rep sets have gone up dramatically, even on various accessory movements, your main lifts are going to increase. That's part of strength training. That's part of strength training. And I almost feel like what he's trying to tell people is that peaking for strength is the same thing as training for strength. That's not the same thing. That isn't the same. And it's giving this ludicrous idea that pretty much every successful power lifter in the world, barring a few exceptions, who run like the Bulgarian training, other than those exceptions, it's almost like he's trying to promote this idea that powerlifters do nothing but 1 rep maxes on the squat, bench, and deadlift. And the reality is most powerlifters do a fair amount of, successful ones do a fair amount of training volume. There are various accessory movements. There is some periodization. There is programming to your training. Some choose not to periodize it into blocks. And I'm talking some world record holding guys, both drug tested and untested, don't even periodize it into blocks like that. They just do them all in the same week. Again, programmed accordingly. But again, he's promoting this idea that that's the only way to get big, or that getting big isn't part of getting strong. Well, that's just not reality. That isn't reality. Size does equal strength. Size does equal strength. And yes, even if you've lost your peak on a 1 rep max, if you've gotten bigger, you can usually hit a new PR on it very, very, very fast as soon as you don't even have to fully peak again usually. Like if you've gained 5 full pounds of muscle on your body and you haven't done a heavy single on any lift, and you take 2 workouts, just 2 workouts hitting heavy singles, you will probably hit your lifetime best on your big lifts by that 2nd or 3rd workout in your entire life at that point. Because 5 pounds of muscle gain is worth a lot of strength. right? Again, we have weight classes in strength sports for a reason. Number one, they're height classes in disguise. But because at the end of the day, for any given height, someone at any given specific height, because you can't change that, because that's where a lot of your strength differences occur, different height ranges, that putting 5 pounds of muscle on your frame will cause an enormous increase in strength. It will cause an enormous increase in strength in all the lifts involved with wherever that muscle was gained. Like 5 pounds of muscle gain, of real solid muscle gain, is worth a ton of strength on your maxes. I'm not just talking 5 pounds on your lifts either. So again, this ludicrous idea that he's promoting, instead of just saying, look, all lifters use this is normal. This is part of strength training. This is part of powerlifting. It's perfectly normal, and he doesn't need to justify it based upon the fact that he's choosing to do some higher volume training right now. That's fine. But just admit that's a normal part of powerlifting, because it really is. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.